Dr. Scott Carroll, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
New Mexico is a very poor state. We deal with a lot of issues related to poverty. Why is violence an important thing to consider in the health and well-being of young people who might be witnessing violence, particularly gun violence, growing up here?
Well, yes, gun violence is a very serious problem, and one has to remember that when in the case of poverty, children are often exposed to a lot of things that, say, someone in a higher socioeconomic status wouldn't be. And so when children grow up in poverty, they are often around guns more, and they actually see their use more in violent ways, or they're more aware of that. Even if they may not directly witness, they often know about someone who's been shot or injured or situations like that.
You work in the emergency room at UNM, working with victims who have been shot, including children. What are you seeing right now?
Well, certainly unfortunately, we see far too many. That's a very sad thing. Both self-inflicted, accidental, and then, of course, victims of violence directly. So, in terms of the children, we do our best to work with them, put them back together. It can be an extended process because they're often dealing with severe physical injuries as well as the psychiatric injury. And we often have to treat both together.
What does the research show right now on the impact of witnessing violence or experiencing gun violence on a child as they're growing up?
It's quite negative. What we know is that you do not have to be the direct victim of a violent act to be traumatized by it. In fact, there's a lot of evidence that the witnesses to the violent act are sometimes actually traumatized more severely than the victim themselves. So in many ways, witnessing predisposes you to being profoundly victimized. So and so in that sense, so even though the witness may not have a physical injury, they can have significant psychiatric injury. And so, we work on that with children in terms of treating it. Thankfully, we have the research has led to some good treatment methods, and so our ability to treat it has certainly improved, even in just the last 5 years.
Can you walk me through that a little bit? How would you talk with a child who'd witnessed gun violence?
So one of the first things is to help them, you first have to understand how they see it, because, children are not adults. And that also is I'll make a little side point here, about children, especially young children, often don't understand the role of TV, in that they don't understand that the TV isn't showing something that's happening in their neighborhood. It may be across the world, and they can't make that distinction. And so a lot of times for children, if they see it on TV, they assume it's in their local environment. And so that's why I think it's important not to you have to be careful exposing children to various types of violence on the television, because they literally think it's in their immediate environment, especially preschool children.
Now, what about if they do actually, though, witness gun violence?
Now, if they actually go witness, they can be substantially traumatized by it. Everything from nightmares to they'll have dissociative reoccurrences of the memory, where they literally will dissociate and re-experience the trauma. And what's more, as we know in humans, is that that experience is quite natural and very common. And so what'll happen is, but it then generalizes in the sense that all kinds of things will trigger it. So things that don't involve guns, or or even you think of obvious triggers like a car backfiring. All kinds of unusual things will become associated with the trauma, and so the flashback of the trauma will often be triggered by all kinds of things that you wouldn't think of.
What are some signs, physical or emotional, that a young person is struggling after witnessing violence?
Probably one of the easiest things to see is difficulty sleeping. So anytime high anxiety directly inhibits the brain's ability to transition into a sleep state. And so it literally sort of forces you to stay awake. And so that's one of the first things you see is difficulty sleeping. What we also know in children, especially young children, is that trauma doesn't look the same as it does in adults. So when if you read about post-traumatic stress disorder, that was really designed or developed from combat veterans, whereas not children. So children will present a bit differently. So you see things like difficulty sleeping, or you see things like increased aggression. So increased temper tantrums and aggression are very common. Children also tend to dissociate much more than adults, where they just kind of go quiet and they just sort of stare off. Because if you think about it, children, part of what happens in a traumatic event is your fight or flight system is triggered, but children can't do either very well. So instead, they freeze. So they'll often freeze and dissociate. So their best hope is to not be seen.
Is it good to get kids to talk about this?
Yes. Now here's the thing, though, is it has to be done in the right way. So it takes specialized training to be able to get the kid to talk in the right way so that they actually get better, rather than sort of re-traumatizing them with a description. So that's why a lot of sort of there was a fad there for a while with debriefing type programs where we're trying to get people to talk immediately about the trauma, and we actually learned that it made people worse. So, we've learned a lot of things about the right way to do it. Now, there will come a time where that you will get them to talk about it, and that's sort of the end point of treatment, that they can talk about the experience without the emotional attachment. So they don't get scared, they don't get frightened or overwhelmed or angry or sad. So that it's a memory, but it doesn't have the emotional content it previously did.
What are some things that adults, parents, teachers, or other caring adults can do to support a young person who's witnessed violence, particularly gun violence?
One of the most important things is stressing the child's safety, making the child feel safe. And, because children naturally turn to adults for their own safety and protection. So they're primed to believe parents when parents tell you, it's okay, you're never going to, be around that, or I'm not going to let you, I'm going to keep you safe. And also, so by protecting them, that natural sense of protection is actually very therapeutic to children.
What if parents don't do that? Some parents experienced a lot of violence growing up and may not realize, may not be in a place where they're like, I want to change this, I want to do something differently, and they're not available for that.
Well, that's where a lot of times we work with the parents. So even, children are, they're not independent. They're very much parts of their families. So a lot of times the best thing you can do for a child is actually to work with the parents and the family and to help them, engage the child in the right way. Because if you think about it, I might see a child maybe once a month, for medication. A therapist might see a child every week, but the parent's there every day, all day long. And so if I can teach the parent even some very basic things about how to be therapeutic, it can really make a huge difference for the child. So a lot of times we don't talk about that a lot, but what we really are doing is we're really teaching the parent to parent in such a way that it's therapeutic for the child.
You see some really difficult things as a provider. It sounds incredibly difficult. How has this impacted you and your thoughts on gun ownership in the U.S. right now?
So my personal feeling is that I believe in responsible gun ownership. I mean, I'm from Louisiana originally. I grew up hunting and fishing, and then I was in the military before I was a psychiatrist, and so I'm very comfortable with guns. However, I have young children, so while I will go to a range and shoot on occasion, I don't have a gun in my house because I would be terrified of the thought of my daughter finding a gun. So I'm very focused on, guns are a responsibility and that they need to be used, safely and correctly. And it's a great responsibility. And so that's the stance I take with parents. So of course, if I'm working with a child who's suicidal or a teenager who's suicidal, we talk about properly securing, the guns. I don't tell them you shouldn't own a gun, but what I'm saying is you need to be responsible about this. And, and we go over sort of security procedures, things like that to keep the children safe.
Young people can be very impulsive.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And that's probably one of the things, to say about teenagers, the big difference between adults and teenagers is that because the frontal lobes are not fully developed in teenagers, they make very impulsive, rash decisions, especially when they're stressed. And so a teenager can go from just being kind of angry to attempting to take their life in just a matter of seconds because if they see the opportunity. And what we know in teenagers is that opportunity is a big trigger to them acting. So if there's no immediate opportunity, the desire to kill themselves can come on very rapidly. It can disappear just as rapidly too. So if they can't access a means to act on the thought, in a matter of minutes, it can actually pass. And so that's why that controlling access to lethal things, everything from medication being locked up to guns and so forth, those are all key to actually keeping a teenager safe, even if they did have a suicidal thought.
Do you find young people, children or teenagers who've witnessed violence, does that lead to thoughts of suicide? Or?
Oh, absolutely. The way you think about it is you have a traumatic event, which then leads to essentially some version of post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, however, over time, what happens is while the post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms may sort of diffuse out or sort of calm down, they often lead to high levels of residual anxiety, and that residual anxiety then causes depression. And so down the road is what you find is eventually, even though the PTSD is somewhat better if it's not treated, they're much more depressed. So if you think about it, it's sort of like, I think of anxiety as sort of like redlining your engine. Well, after a certain point, you're just redlining. Eventually, the governor has to kick in to shut the engine down. That's the depression. So if you're too anxious for too long, eventually the depression kicks in to sort of like calm your system down, shut it down. And in that state of the depression is when you see the suicidal thoughts.
Any policy changes or structural changes that you think would help address these issues that we've just been talking about with young people and gun violence?
I think it's very important to stress, at a societal level, in terms of responsible gun ownership, in terms of properly securing weapons, and also training. If you own a gun, you need to be properly trained. In many ways, and there's a lot of research that shows this, when you own a gun, the person who's most at risk is you, that you'll accidentally harm yourself, or you'll, while cleaning your gun, it'll misfire. So there's a lot of things about, being able to handle a gun safely. And there's a lot to it, and it also needs to be done on a regular basis, because if you don't handle guns daily or regularly, you get rusty, and then you're dangerous. I compare it to flying an airplane. We joke about how doctors make terrible pilots because we don't fly enough. That's the problem. So we're dangerous because we don't fly enough, whereas somebody who flies every day is much safer. And it's the same thing with guns.
Dr. Carroll, thank you so much for shedding some light on the issues young people are dealing with, and these are interesting things for us to think about.
Thank you.